So hey everybody, here with Dan, Captain Dan Deluce with the Royal Canadian Air Force. Dan, we're sitting in your office.
Yeah, here we go. I mean, normally the office is probably a lot higher up in the air, but today we're on the ground.
Yeah. Well, at least maybe, I don't know, what, 12 feet high, something
A
like
little
that?
bit slower.
Yeah, right. Yeah, going a bit slower.
0 knots.
Well, you're sitting in a 0-0 seat, so that works anyways.
Yeah, there you
go. So let's go through the cockpit. Describe the CF-18 cockpit to me. And yeah, while we kind of go through it, just kind of point stuff out and what some of the screens do, and then we'll talk about starting the jet, if you're
Sure.
okay with that.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Okay, so at first glance, I think a lot of people think the cockpit's really small. Actually, in comparison with a lot of jets and jet trainers, it's pretty roomy. Actually, the thing is that they're made so that you have everything at your reach, and there's still a bit of storage and stuff. So we have kind of a lot of our switches on either side. Our displays, and then our heads-up display as well.
Mm-hmm.
Radios, and then your standard kind of backup instruments, and then your engine instruments and your fuel gauge as well.
Okay.
So I guess so we have an oxygen gauge in the back. You might not be able to see it. An oxygen switch. Some of our volume controls.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it be for different radios or intercom and stuff. The main two things they say is like you have two hands, so one hand for the throttle, one hand for the control column.
Mm-hmm.
On the control column and the throttle, you have I guess like the ability to manipulate the screens to trim your aircraft. So you got your standard I guess hands-free or like close by trim switch.
Mm-hmm.
We got a rocker switch that can cycle through different modes for the aircraft, and then your weapon release and your gun trigger switch. And then on the throttle, you have kind of like a mouse for your screens up here. You'll have your speed brake, your different radio controls. So in order to speak on one of the radios, you can just push a switch up or down, and then you get the number 1 or number 2 radio.
Okay.
We have our ID light on there as well. So basically, like, you have a lot of ability to just fly with your hands on the control column and the throttle, and still be able to do what you have to do in order to accomplish the mission.
And that's called HOTAS, right? Hands-on, throttle and stick?
That's right.
Right on. Cool.
And then, so, your right side, so it's 2 engines, so we got 2 generators, the battery gauge, hydraulics, radalt indicator,
Mm-hmm.
Your temperature control, or your cabin air controls on the right, radar, INS, GPS, and then your forward-looking infrared sniper pod. And then with all that, so you turn all that on, and then you might have to program some of it with the screens. You'll probably align your INS and then your GPS, and then kind of off to the races. You talked about a bit about starting.
Yeah. Talk me through the startup of
So we have an APU, auxiliary power unit, so you're going to turn that on generally,
Mm-hmm.
and then that provides the power to turn the compressor in order to get it up to a speed where once you ignite the gas mixture, then it'll be able to light the engine from there.
Okay.
So that's generally how we're going to start. The F-18 is with the APU.
Mm-hmm.
Once you got that started, you're going to power on your electronics. You're going to basically check your flight controls, get your ATIS as per normal, and then whatever mission-specific programming you're going to do, whether it be entering waypoints or programming your weapons or any of that stuff. And then after that, so it's a pretty quick start as long as everything goes according to plan, and then you're off to the races.
So when you see an F-18 starting up and it's sitting on the ground for a fair amount of time, well, I guess that's all relative, but is that typically like the IMU all lining up?
Yeah, I mean, it might only take 5 minutes, and we can get the aircraft going pretty quick. If you see it on the ground for any longer, a lot of times, say you had to be at a specific point at a certain time, you might give yourself more time in case you had to troubleshoot any anomalies or start anomalies, or any of your systems anomalies as well.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times we'll have our ground crew with us. Like I said, with the walk around, that if they found that your hydraulic fluid, for instance, was low, they'd actually be able to fill it up with the engines running. So they'll do that as part of their checks. So I think generally it just depends, kind of the mission, depends the timing. For me, for the demo, you'll see this starts a little bit quicker,
Mm-hmm.
in order to save some fuel, because they were pretty fuel critical in order to accomplish the whole demo sequence.
Right.
So we'll try to keep that as short as possible, to save the fuel for the show.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. Describe to me the different screens that you have in front. What do they serve to function as? What do they do?
I think everyone has their own personal preference, but you can actually put whatever you want on whichever screen.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter where you put them per se. There is some techniques out there. For me, like, I like to have my moving map on the bottom screen, and then maybe my stores or my infrared or my sniper page, and usually the radar is not going to be on your right.
Okay. And then the heads-up display is always on, right? But as a modernized fighter, you're also able to wear a JHEMX helmet, right?
That's right. So we have our HUD, so that gives us a lot of our flying, outputs or instrument outputs right up front. So you're able to keep flying, keep looking outside, and have the information you need to stay level, to know your airspeed, to know your altitude. With the JHEMX, you have a lot of the same functionality in your helmet, so now you can be looking around and still have that information and some more available to you.
Cool. Do you like flying with the JHEMX, or?
I do. I find them more comfortable. They're a little heavier.
Mm-hmm.
I think I can hear better in them as well. So for the demo sequence, we don't use the JHEMX. We use our normal 190.
Mm-hmm.
But the JHEMX is a nice tool, especially for more tactical flying.
Right. And you can, so if you've locked up on a target, like whether it be air to air, or even if you're in air to ground mode, looking out the cockpit window to the sides, the JHEMX will point out what you're focused on. Is that correct?
Yeah, depending on how you set it up, but yeah, that's generally one of the benefits of the JHEMX.
Yeah, right on. So if you were to be in air-to-air mode, how do you switch from air-to-air to air-to-ground in the F-18? Because it's a multi-role fighter, so...
Yeah, I guess the easiest way would be our air-to-air and air-to-ground buttons up in the front here.
Okay.
That would be the one method to do that.
Okay, that's probably the just simplest, is just push button and it just reconfigures the jet to be optimized to that role.
Or you could also deselect it if you were more just traveling or transiting.
Right, right. And speaking of, the F-18, I assume, has like an autopilot. You can be hands off and just...
It does, yeah. So the switch here is the autopilot.
Okay.
It's not as thorough as maybe a commercial airliner, but it has some... We can do an altitude hold or a heading hold and stuff like that.
Awesome.
So it wouldn't be a three-dimensional autopilot per se. You wouldn't be able to plan a descent or anything with this aircraft.
Mm-hmm. And on the control stick, so you have some of the buttons there. Which button do you fire to fire a missile? What do you do to fire to release a bomb? And what do you do to fire the gun?
So the red button here would be for releasing any air-to-ground weapons, and then the trigger on the back is going to be for your missiles and for your gun.
Okay, so it's a multi-function trigger.
That's right.
Okay, right on. So what else do you like about flying the F-18, and is there any other kind of interesting aspect to your office here? Because, yeah, like you say, most people think that it's quite tight. In one way it is, but you have a full 300. Well, you have a great view from here. Once the canopy.
I mean, the the biggest thing, yeah, you're right, is the canopy cockpit. The ability to see, you get quite a bit more than your standard aircraft.
And in terms of like performance and it being in the jet, you're strapped in pretty good, so you're pulling G's and your G suit's inflating and deflating as you go. What's it like in terms of flying long distances in the F-18? And
Well, I guess my biggest complaint would be there's a lack of a washroom.
yeah,
But other than that, it's not. I wouldn't say it's not uncomfortable, but yeah, you definitely maybe feel the long missions a little bit. I think with most aircraft you probably would, or even just driving a car, you'd probably want to get out and stretch at some point. But I guess the main thing is to stay in shape as much as possible and kind of prepare yourself mentally for, or maybe get a good night's sleep and all that, and that'll help you.
And
long hauls.
yeah, well, and speaking of long hauls, when you've flown across the Atlantic and you've flown all across Canada, how do you prepare yourself for the long hauls, and what do you personally take for food and drink? Because it's not like you can just pull over to a gas station.
Yeah, I guess everyone's a little different depending on how far I'm going. Maybe I'll bring a sandwich or something that's not going to make a mess.
Right.
Is
Yeah.
the biggest thing.
Yeah. So an egg salad sandwich isn't really the right one.
It's funny. It's important to stay hydrated, but also, like I said, there's no washroom, right? So maybe I'll bring some drinks for later in the flight.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I know from some of your colleagues that are super tall, just as a way to kind of stretch out a bit more, you can either raise or lower the seat, or you can move the pedals forward or back just for a different adjustment.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we have a switch to move the rudders, and the seat goes up and down. For me, like, I'm 6 foot tall, and I still have the seat all the way down and the rudder pedals most of the way out. So
okay, yeah,
you wouldn't want to be too much taller than 6 foot, but it's possible.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, this is a great treat for you to share a little bit of your office space with us. Thank you so much. And what are you looking forward to for the rest of the air show demo season?
I'm enjoying getting to do a bit more of the aerobatics lately, and I'm looking forward to some of the big Canadian air shows and putting on a show for Canadians.
Right on. Are you going into the States at all this year to land? I know you've done some over U.S. shows, but
we have nothing planned at this point to land in the U.S.
Okay, right on. Well, at least you showed the flag down south anyways. That was awesome. Good on you.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.
Yeah, Dan Deluce, thank you so much for taking the time. Deluce, you're awesome, and I hope people get an appreciation for what it's like to be a fighter pilot in the Royal Canadian Air Force.
Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you so much. Take care.